rise to honor the life and the legacy of Julie Ann McDonald, a lifelong Missourian from Savannah who recently passed. Julie Ann was a beloved mother and grandmother who touched the lives of many in our community. Friends and family knew her as Mimi, someone who put service above herself, caring for her neighbors, her community, and especially her family. She regularly volunteered at multiple organizations and schools. She was deeply involved in her local church, and she brought joy to her book club with friends that cherished her company. Throughout a 42-year teaching career, her compassion, leadership, and dedication touched and inspired the lives of countless students who had the privilege of learning under her mentorship. A rich life and a storied legacy, Julie Ann leaves behind her husband, Martin, her sons, Ryan and Scott, her daughters-in-law, Vicki and Laura, and her two grandchildren, Mackenzie and Jameson. My prayers are with her loved ones and with her family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose? For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, to revise and extend my
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call out a vile attack on an American patriot, Senator Mark Kelly of the great state of Arizona. Yesterday, unelected billionaire Elon Musk, who has never served this nation a day in uniform, called Senator Kelly a traitor for visiting our nation's ally, Ukraine. A traitor is one who commits treason. That consists of giving aid and comfort to an enemy. Ukraine is not our enemy. Ukraine is our ally. Mark Kelly has served our nation honorably from 1986 to 2011 in the United States Navy, rising to the rank of captain, having served 39 combat missions during the Gulf War. During his naval career, he was awarded 2 Defense Superior Service Medals, 1 Legion of Merit, 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 4 Air Medals with Combat 5V, 2 Navy Commendation Medals, 1 Navy Achievement Medal, 2 Southwest Asia Service Medals, 1 Navy Expeditionary Medal, a NASA Distinguished Service Medal, and an Overseas Service Ribbon. He only resigned his commission to help provide care and assistance to his beloved wife, who had served here formerly, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, following an assassination attempt on her in Tucson in 2011. Words and statements have meaning. Elon Musk needs to be held accountable for his. And today, world leaders have resoundingly stood tall aside the nation of Ukraine in agreeing to a 1-month ceasefire. The United States has also agreed to lift the embargo on armaments and will be sending 1 month of armaments to Ukraine as the rest of the world looks to Russia to be cooperative in our effort to stop the killing in Central Europe. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring much-needed attention to an extraordinary ball player and young man and a ball hopeful. His name is Alberto Osuna. He was born in America, and he's affectionately known as Berto. He transferred to the University of Tennessee in January after an impressive career at North Carolina and Walter State Community College, where he knocked out 45 home runs and knocked in 140 runs over 3 seasons. Despite following all the necessary steps to secure eligibility to play for the University of Tennessee, the NCAA, in their infinite wisdom, has blocked his opportunity. Students at UT have painted the rock to my left here to show their support for Berto in hopes that he might play his final season with the Vols at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. He wants to do something for his family. This is what this is all about. And over a minute, I don't have time to explain it all, but this situation just isn't about Berto. It's about ensuring that student athletes are on a level playing field, Mr. Speaker, against a bureaucratic machine and nightmare that the NCAA has become and it seemingly continues to let down student athletes they claim to serve. Just follow the dollars, Mr. Speaker. I urge the NCAA to take some serious action and grant Alberto the immediate eligibility he deserves and take the necessary steps to prioritize the well-being of their student athletes, ensuring that opportunities for success are not blocked by unnecessary red tape. Asuno left his whole life in Tampa to come to Knoxville and play for Coach Tony Vitello and the Vols. The NCAA needs to do the right thing. Free Berto. Give him the time he deserves. The Vols are stacked again this year, Mr. Speaker. They're coming off a national championship. They're winning again. It's not imperative that he gets on the team for them to win. It's just the right thing. NCAA, do the right dadgum thing. And I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the extraordinary life of Gwen Robinson, a dear friend of mine, an incredible leader, an incredible human being. She was one of the first people I met when I got to Cincinnati, and she welcomed me in the way she did with almost everyone, immediately kind and immediately generous. There's a real argument to be made that much of what I've accomplished, what so many of us accomplished in Southwest Ohio, wouldn't have happened without her. She fought so hard for the children in the Bond Hill Head Start program that she helped lead, making sure each one of them had the highest quality preschool. It was part of what convinced me that every child in Cincinnati deserved 2 years of quality preschool. And when we said we wanted to do that, she was there every step of the way. She poured everything into helping us get the preschool promise passed. She did the same with the public transit levy a few years later. There aren't enough words to capture her impact. Gwen was a giant and will be missed by all of us. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, here's some truth. Despite many false claims, the continuing resolution we just passed does not cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, or veterans benefits, or any health care benefits at all. In reality, the CR was almost entirely the Democrats' budget bill last year. So the opposition today and their vote to shut down the government is a little perplexing. Mr. Speaker, here's what this bill actually offers. It gives our troops a 10% raise, provides $6 billion for veterans health care, invests $7.6 billion into WIC for women and infants, $425 million for food delivery programs for seniors, among other things. And, Mr. Speaker, we're paying for it responsibly. We're repurposing $20 billion in excess funding from the attempt to increase the IRS by $80 billion last year. And we're redirecting $10 billion from the Commerce Department's slush fund, funds that were not used and need to be repurposed. This CR sets the stage for a plan for a new golden era for our country, and I was pleased to support it. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to adjust the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago on their 50th anniversary and to recognize the enduring legacy of Gail Sankara, a fearless leader for housing justice. Gail understood that owning a home was not just about having a place to live, it was about stability, opportunity, and the chance to build a future, a better future. She took on fighting the banks against redlining and was a champion of the Community Reinvestment Act and never backed down in her pursuit of fairness for working families. During the early 1980s, I had the privilege of working at NHS to see how access to affordable housing could change lives. I saw struggling families become thriving homeowners. I saw struggling neighborhoods revitalized into thriving communities. NHS has shaped many lives. It certainly played a pivotal role early in my own formation. Our work is far from over. Families are still being priced out. Displacement and gentrification are still impacting families, and the access to these programs is under attack. So today, we celebrate NHS on 50 incredible years, but also recommit the fight to housing justice. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
I'd like to ask unanimous consent to speak for a minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Last weekend when I was home, I saw a very good guy who was recently married. He already has 2 children. And he was all happy because he was buying a new house. He had to save up money for a down payment to do it. The thing I noticed, though, is that during the 2 or 3 years that it took to save for the down payment, he had to live with his in-laws, which was fine because he had a strong family, and that's the way it took to buy the house. It bothered me knowing that in other places in this country, people are just given housing. They don't have to live with their in-laws. And in essence, the government is treating them better than this example of a guy who was married and spent a couple of years with his parents. So I hope in the future that this Congress changes the rules so we no longer benefit or raise this guy's taxes to set up someone for their own house immediately. Thank you.
For what purposes the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute in order to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, colleagues. The power of the purse belongs to Congress, not to the president. And this has nothing to do with our current president, Donald Trump. This is in the Constitution, and it's clear as day, and it's been affirmed over and over again by the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to have it both ways. They want to let Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, wreck our government with illegal cuts, but they seem to lack the courage of their convictions to actually vote on these cuts. They lack that courage because they know how toxic these cuts are. Deep cuts to health care, cuts to child care, cuts that help the most vulnerable amongst us. They won't even allow a vote on my amendment, when all it would do is to force the president to follow the Constitution. I am here with a simple request from my Republican colleagues. Abide by your oath. Stand up for the Constitution. Allow a vote on this amendment. Stand up for your own constituents and stand up for your own constitutional authority. That is what we are elected to do. That is why we are here. It is one of the main reasons we are here. Do not give our authority as Congress away to an unelected bureaucrat. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House chamber for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the great people of Youngsville, North Carolina, ahead of their 150th anniversary in celebration, on celebration of March 17th. Originally a railroad town and a community along U.S. Highway 1, Youngsville played a pivotal role in the growth of North Carolina's agricultural and rail industries, and in turn helped develop the economy of our state and our region together. Today, Youngsville mirrors her residents. It is a vibrant, a proudly patriotic community with robust growth across the board. And yet somehow, despite this growth, Youngsville has retained its character and heart while reimagining its downtown to meet the demands of an active community. It is no wonder that young families from across North Carolina and the region have flocked to this area. As its residents know, Youngsville is a truly special place and a treasure for the great state of North Carolina. Congratulations on this anniversary, and I wish you all the best in the next 150 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hazel Dukes was a lifelong champion for families and children in New York and across the country. Through her decades of civil rights activism, including as president of the NAACP, Dr. Dukes fought tirelessly to build a more perfect union. Dr. Dukes broke barriers as the first Black American to work for the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, where she stood up for Long Island communities that had been long ignored or underserved. As we mourn her tremendous loss, we take comfort in the fact that Dr. Dukes' legacy will continue to live on in those that she mentored and the countless Americans who have been impacted by her life's work. May she rest in peace. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, extend and revise my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Jeremy Zivitz, a beloved father, husband, and a member of our community and a teacher at De La Salle High School in Minneapolis. Jeremy dedicated his life to teaching and touched the lives of hundreds of Minneapolis students over the years. Even in the midst of difficult health challenges, he never wavered in his commitment into educating and supporting his students. Generations of young people will carry his lessons of kindness, authenticity, and the power of connection. Jeremy saw education as more than just an avenue for teaching. He saw it as a place to help his students become their best selves. His students and colleagues alike remember him as a teacher who led with authenticity and heart. Our community will miss him dearly, and his legacy will live on. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and expand my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. What happened today is disgraceful. House Republicans have abandoned working Americans. They are taking housing and food from our seniors, children and families. They have abandoned our veterans, the people who have bled for our country so that we can be free. They have given this administration and its illegitimate mercenaries free license to gut agencies and services. And Mr. Speaker, make no mistake, the vote the Republicans took today is a shameful turn for this body. In the words of Danzalee Abernathy, the daughter of Reverend Ralph Abernathy, best friend to Martin Luther King and civil rights leader, we will not go quietly into this reality. The American people want you to fight back, fight on, stand strong for truth, justice, and equality for all. And Danzalee and Oregon, I will continue to fight, and I hope you will stay with me in this fight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House just voted to pass a radical partisan government funding bill. I voted no because it lets Elon Musk decide how this money is going to be spent by federal agencies. There is a lot wrong with this bill. This bill fails to lower the cost of housing and instead cuts rent subsidies for low-income Americans, including seniors and domestic violence survivors, by $700 million. This enables President Trump and Elon Musk to cancel transportation infrastructure projects already underway. These projects are reducing traffic congestion and improving subway systems. This reduces the emergency food program by $20 million at a time when food prices are on the rise. This allows Musk and Trump to fire thousands of employees at the Social Security Administration, and it cuts funding for health care for veterans who are exposed to toxins and so much more that is worse. We needed a bill that protects the middle class and makes life less expensive for residents in Westchester and the Bronx. This continuing resolution is the opposite of that. Remember, I told you so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to state that should now the House-approved full-year continued resolution become law, it will be a legislative tragedy for Northwest Indiana that will strip away specific funding for public safety and economic development. By not including community project funding requests approved by this institution in the House Appropriations Committee just last year, Indiana's 1st Congressional District loses $4 million in approved funds to support equipment and resources for law enforcement agencies, and $7 million in approved economic development projects, and reducing health benefits for veterans and putting at risk health care for seniors and children with complex medical conditions. The House majority has made Northwest Indiana less safe and jeopardizes our potential for economic growth and the ability to create more work and wealth and put veteran health care and those veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, Agent Orange, and radiation health care at risk. It is shameful that we have misled our local law enforcement agencies, local units of government, and veterans and seniors. I encourage my Senate colleagues to reject this harmful measure, and with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
I have consent to address the House for 1 minute. I extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in honor of Dr. Hazel Dukes, a lifelong activist, a champion for civil rights, and the president of the NAACP New York State Conference. Her fierce commitment to fighting for equality and justice is simply unmatched. She was a trailblazer in New York State and across the country, a renowned community organizer and a leading voice at the NAACP for nearly 40 years. She worked tirelessly for equity in housing, healthcare, and education. I remember sitting next to Dr. Dukes at a long meeting where we were standing for hours, clapping and cheering. I was so tired and kept trying to sit down, but she reminded me that it was a privilege to be there and to remind me to stand right back up. Her strength came from her compassion and love for our communities. The legacy that she leaves behind will inspire women, girls, and advocates across New York for generations to come. It was an honor to have known you, Dr. Dukes. May you rest in power. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. In recognition of National Nutrition Month, I introduced the Feed Hungry Veterans Act, legislation to permanently remove barriers to SNAP, often faced by veterans with work-limiting disabilities. According to the 2023 RAND report, 1.4 million veterans are food insecure. That is in part because many disabled veterans do not meet all of the qualifications for federal nutrition programs like SNAP. My legislation amends the definition of elderly or disabled for SNAP to include veterans with one service-connected disability rated at 60% or higher, or 2 or more service-connected disabilities, at least one of which is rated 40% or higher. With more than 1/3 of disabled veterans in the United States facing food insecurity, we must do more to support those who have honorably served our nation. The Feed Hungry Veterans Act is a critical step to ensuring veterans have long-term access to critical food assistance. With that, I yield back.
The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 11th, 2025. I hereby designate the period from Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 through Sunday, March 23rd, 2025 as a district work period under Clause 13 of Rule 1. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd like to yield the gentlewoman from Minnesota as much time as she may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would also like to thank the gentleman and my fellow member of Ways and Means, the gentleman from Arizona, for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the Moorhead boys hockey team on their first state championship, defeating Stillwater 7-6 at the Excel Center over the weekend. The 2A championship win was led by this year's Mr. Hockey, Mason Kraft. The team dedicated the game to their teammate Ethan, who passed away unexpectedly last year at the age of 16.
holding up his jersey throughout the game and bringing the jersey through the handshake line. The Moorhead Spuds have made their families, community, and the whole 7th District proud. Congratulations to the Spuds. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the East Grand Forks boys hockey team on their incredible Class 1A championship win. With what sounded like the entire community of East Grand Forks in the stand, the team defeated the St. Cloud Cathedral 2-1 in overtime. The East Grand Forks Green Wave has made their families, communities, and the entire 7th District so very proud, and I'm excited for all of you to hoist that championship banner back at home. Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the Warroad girls hockey team, the Lady Warriors, on their 10-year streak as section champions. These women from a small town in the northernmost Minnesota are part of one of the best girls hockey teams in the last 20 years. You have made your families and communities proud. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Praise Live in Osakis, Minnesota, on 40 wonderful years of broadcasting. For 40 years, Praise Live has been bringing hope and faith to people across central and western Minnesota. They have even partnered with stations in Guyana and Uganda and as far-reaching as war-torn Sudan to spread the gospel and its message of encouragement, faith, and hope across Africa. Thank you, Praise Live, for connecting with, praying for, and strengthening the Christian communities you are committed to serving. I pray for a successful next 40 years. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I appreciate it. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'm going to try something this evening. The thesis I'm going to try to sell tonight is that data is substantially a solution for us. And you go, huh? So I'm going to walk through a number of things that just came out in the new MedPAC report because, and look, I've only just started reading it, but there's a couple of interesting things. I'm going to try to walk through the reality of what drives debt and deficits like I do every week. I'm going to try to walk folks through some of the actual math instead of some of the hysteria that is modern politics where we make crap up because we don't tell the total details. And let's see if we can actually make any progress here on sort of the intellectual capital of this place. So just off the top of my head, Mr. Speaker, you've seen the stories of, the butchering of federal employees. Okay, let's walk through just some of the math. You got 3 million federal employees. If 77,000 have decided to take the early retirement offer, let's see, that's, God, I should have, dear heaven, I should have calculated this before, is 3%, 3% of the federal population. I have a chart we're working on, did not make my stack, to show the growth in the number of federal employees in the last decade. It's a little rich how many folks run around here and they want more spending for their projects, or they don't want this, or they don't want that, but at the same time, they're lined up at our doors and want more spending. If I could come to you and say, guys, we're going to try to find a way to make the way we deliver services much more efficient, much more rational. So let's actually sort of walk through a couple of the boards. This is one we start with a lot. And the number now is a bit more dour. This board's a year out of date, but I didn't want to spend the money to reprint it. Do you see the blue portion? Okay, this fiscal year, it's about 25% of all the spending is in the blue. That's what we get to vote on. That's military. That's what we call non-defense discretionary. we borrow about, let's see, last year for every dollar we took in taxes, we borrowed or we spent $1.39. So functionally 39 cents. This year it will be a little better. We think it will be only 36 cents for every dollar we take in taxes. So what that basically means is everything you and I as a member of Congress vote on is borrowed. But we have this reconciliation budget. It's one of the few times where we actually get to talk a little bit about what's in the red. But we don't get to touch net interest. Interest is interest. And some of the math coming in right now says interest this year, this fiscal year, could be about 1.1 to 1.2. I actually am a bit more dour. Trillion dollars, making interest functionally the second highest expense in the federal government. Until this reconciliation budget makes it through, defense is like number 4 on spending. So Social Security, interest, functioning Medicare, defense. But when you take a look at what we're even allowed to talk about in a reconciliation budget, and you know why we do the reconciliation budget, it's so we can get around this 60-vote rule in the Senate. So we're doing all this dancing and stuff because of the Senate rules. But we can't touch net interest, and we're not allowed to go near Social Security. So think about that. That area on that last chart I just showed you that was red, the majority of it we're not even allowed to talk about. We can't touch it. We can't do anything about it. So when you see the authorizations, that's actually why committees like Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce have such a lift. So what happens if I come to you and start to say, you have a country that's binging on debt. We're in extraordinary measures right now, so some of the daily debt calculations are a little screwed up. But before we went into extraordinary measures, we were in the $60,000, $70,000 per second. Every day, every second. If my math is correct and we come in at about 2.2 trillion, maybe 2.3 trillion of borrowing this year, you got to start thinking about that. So we take in about 5 trillion in tax receipts. We're going to spend about 7 trillion, meaning about 7.25% of the entire economy is borrowed this year. And if we don't get our act together, in 9 budget years, it could be 9.2% of the entire economy is borrowed. And I was just wanted to make the point, because I'd come here in the past, interest rates have fallen dramatically in the last couple of weeks, which, remember the seesaw. We've talked about the seesaw. When the economy is really strong, or there's a shortage of capital to borrow, interest rates go up, meaning the United States, we pay a lot more in debt servicing. When interest rates go down, that typically means the expectations of the economy are slowing down, meaning our tax receipts fall. So the middle of the seesaw stays the same. I saw some people getting giddy. Look, interest rates are down. It also means actually some of our modeling in the future quarters of tax receipts also are starting to fall now. So there's no free option anymore. But you've seen some of the discussions. Ray Dalio has been out there talking about the heart attack of debt and what happens to other countries and the history of that. Going back, I think he's in his book, he's going back a couple thousand years. The United States, so here's functionally the world borrowing. China's borrowing about 17% of what we call the available capital for sovereign borrowing. Japan's borrowing about 10%. We're borrowing 40%. So we're about 25% of the world's GDP, but we're borrowing 40% of the money that goes to sovereigns. You got to understand the scale, the binging on debt. And when I get to the very last board, I'm going to show again the chart that just seems to upset people, but it's math. From today through the next 30 years, discretionary spending actually, according to CBO's 30-year model, actually ends up with sort of, it grows slower than tax receipts. But it's Social Security and Medicare. It's demographics. It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's demographics. Where it becomes partisan is the unwillingness to tell truth about the math, and then actually the creativity of how we disrupt the cost. So how do you actually find some of these things? This chart's a little awkward. I would have designed it a little different, but sometimes you're running around. The point we're trying to make is, here was the effective interest in 2014 to the United States. Now all of a sudden we're up here, and the actual market rate we expect in the future to actually continue to consume, meaning interest is our great fragility in this country. I've told the comment many times, at our current rate of borrowing, we've almost put the bond market in charge of this country. Because if you have to bring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to market every month, you screw with your banker. And in many ways, that bond market now is our banker. For my brothers and sisters on the left, who often want to attack the tax reform of 2017, attack tax receipts, I've done presentation after presentation behind this microphone using the stuff from the Manhattan Institute that basically shows if we do all the Democrats' tax hikes and then do the economic adjustments, often from Democrat groups, you get about 1.5% of GDP in new tax receipts. Okay, maybe we're going to be pushed against the wall and have to do that, but we're borrowing over 7% of GDP. So it's like on Social Security. It's common that the reframe is, well, just raise the cap. Okay. In 2033, Social Security Trust Fund is empty. Our brothers and sisters on Social Security will take 17 to 20% cut. We double senior poverty in America. And when someone says, well, just raise the cap, our model is in that next year, 2034, raising the cap only covers about 38% of the shortfall, and you've wiped out the cash and the other things you actually need to also save Medicare, which actually that trust fund runs out like 3 years later. So one of the reasons for this chart is trying to demonstrate something very simple, that back when, before TCJA, the 2017 tax reform, the actual projection of what tax receipts would be, so before the tax changes, we're right on track. You see the weird blip there? That was the remarkable amount of spending that happened during the pandemic. We actually just went back to nominal. So what happens here? What happens when there's this intense hunger to play this weird blame game instead of being willing to tell our voters the truth? The vast majority of debt this decade will be interest and healthcare costs, mostly Medicare. So one more, contributions to the increase in spending from 2024 to 2035. Interest. So remember, why this chart is important. Let's put it in perspective. Baseline. This is actually with the taxes going up at the end of this year, just baseline. So following current law, not the clowns that actually run around saying, let's just avoid the law and just let's pretend what we spend, we spend. The law says we're going to borrow $22 trillion over the next 10 years. Okay, that's baseline. Here's the mix of that borrowing. 24% of that will be interest of the additional borrowing. Old age survivors, Social Security will be 31%. Discretionary, 13%. Other mandatory, 4%. And Medicare, 28%. Now, the fact of the matter is, old age survivor, Medicare have their own trust funds, except for the fact that within that 10-year window, at least this trust fund is now emptied. Are we allowed to talk about it? Are we allowed to do the moral thing here and maybe stop the doubling of senior poverty? But yet, the fact of the matter is, maybe I'm an idiot for getting behind the microphone and actually mentioning the word Social Security because there's someone writing an attack ad on me right now for trying to save it. It's just the sickness of this place. So let's actually walk through a little bit. I saw a number of folks who actually have been attacking Doge and the attempts to use data. Understand that some of the communication skills are haphazard. But if I came to you today and said, let's strip any partisanship, we need to find waste, fraud, abuse, modeling issues where we're doing things the wrong way, where we have models that are decades, sometimes decades and decades out of date, would you hire an army of auditors, an army of lawyers, or would you hire data scientists? Turns out, several years ago, Congress started requiring agencies that send out payments, that cover healthcare costs, that send out checks, these things, start telling us your error reports. Okay, so for 2023, we think the reports come back at $236 billion of improper payments. Okay, that's a stunning amount of money. But that doesn't mean there's $236 billion of improper payments that have been stolen. There's a bunch of it has been, but it's more complex. And an army of auditors, it would take years to grind through this. That's why actually the miracle of technology right now, hire some data scientists. They're really expensive. Most of them actually I've met recently actually are bathing. That's both funny and shockingly true. I met one that is an MIT dropout. Apparently MIT wasn't hard enough for him. But that's actually what he does. And the failure to access data information. Well, it turns out a whole bunch of what we label as improper payments, we lacked data on understanding. So what happens when it's the data scientists that will help us grind through? I just grabbed this one because Treasury itself, not just CMS, all the other agencies, Treasury itself has $21 billion of improper payments. And you walk through what those were and why they were improper. They didn't verify household size. They didn't verify the qualifications. They didn't verify these things. That is basically data. So let's actually have a little more fun here. Types of improper payments. Okay, we actually estimate of that 36 billion. And actually, this is for 2024. The other chart was 2023. 135 billion are overpayments. Now understand, for a lot of those, that may come through CMS, a Medicare reimbursement. CMS has the ability, months and months, a year later, to try to recapture those monies. What we're trying to get the data scientists to build us models to understand, okay, if there's 135 billion of overpayments, how much of that comes back to us and how much is, we'll call it leakage, even though leakage is with a B is, and then there's, we have 12 billion unknown payments. We know payments went out, but there wasn't enough data telling us what they were. We had almost 8 billion of underpayments where we underpaid people. So you see what I'm trying to provide here is we know we have a problem. We've known we've had this problem for decades. For the last decade, we've been tracking the problem. And it's only been the last couple months we're beginning to tackle the problem and try to use technology to dive into what are these? What are these categories? And understand. Now, some of this, you'll notice the huge spike in improper payment amounts. That's actually mostly from the pandemic when we were pushing money, shoveling money out of this place like crazy. But we've been tracking this since 2014. It's taken to now to find the technology, to find the talent, to start diving into this math. And why is this just so important? If you're someone like me who believes there's trillions of dollars over the next 10 years that we can save by just modernizing the way we deliver services, you first have to identify the outliers, identify what's going on. But why is this so incredibly important? You've got to understand what we're up against. outlays of the largest mandatory programs are projected to massively increase. So let's be a moment of brutal honesty. This is 2025, this is 2034, so functioning 9 budget years. Social Security will have a 61% increase in spending. It's just that this is our demographics. And I'm going to try to explain these numbers a little bit more. Medicare will have almost a 78% increase in spending over those next 9 budget years. Now, there's a little more for this because this has none of the offsets. So I want to try to provide a level of brutal honesty. Remember, on like Medicare, remember on some things you have a portion of copay, those things. So, but it's still a 75% increase, but it goes from $2 trillion spending, so 9 budget years, Medicare itself will be a couple $1 trillion, just the spending on that. If you do the offset, the payments the senior makes, okay, that's about $400 billion. It's still a 75% increase in spending. What would happen if I could come to you and say, if we would use technology, if we'd modernize? So here's the MedPAC report that came out in the last couple days. Haven't read the whole thing, read part of it. Here's last year's MedPAC report. We read all of it, highlighted it, and we actually make our staff read it. Well, it turns out around here, actually reading the actual math and the concepts. So if I came to you right now and said, like in here, there's a whole paragraph that's saying there's something wrong in Medicare Advantage data. Now, MedPAC report says Medicare Advantage, really important program. We need to keep it, but we're going to have to dive in on how to modernize how it works. Because here, coding intensity, they made the adjustments for coding intensity, but it basically says, translates into a projected $84 billion, or 17% of total payments, meaning Medicare Advantage coming at $84 billion this year, more than fee-for-service. And that's with the adjustments for renal failure and other things. Look, and I've already started to have the MedPAC report fall apart, so if any of you talk to the MedPAC folks, ask them for better binding on their reports. So what would happen if I came to you right now and said, we can do things to fix these outliers in cost and never cut a service by changing the incentives? Instead of the incentives that the MedPAC report talks about of scoring people as sicker and sicker and taking that additional spiff spending, how about a system that says, why don't we incentivize the providers in this program to help our brothers and sisters who are seniors be healthier? And that making your population, helping them be healthier, is actually your profit. Is that heresy? I would argue that's just good design. And we don't have a choice, because last week, the Joint Economic Committee, we published a report. And I chair the Joint Economic Committee, and I appreciate we have remarkably hardworking economists, and we're trying very hard, but we're willing to go to places that are politically dangerous but mathematically honest, which is something that rarely happens around here. But we tried to touch on things like how fragile is U.S. debt to higher interest rates. Fact of the matter is, I did a chart a couple of weeks ago that showed if the United States went back to a 6% handle on U.S. sovereign debt. Now, you go, well, that's a lot higher than we're at today. Yeah, but go back to the early 2000s, we were right up against 6%. You do realize in 9 budget years, if you are at 6%, it would mean 45% of all U.S. tax collections go just to interest. We do a chapter here on the effects of obesity to our society, to spending, to longevity, to family formation. Last year's report came in over $9 trillion. This year, we even define it more to understand what happens when the single biggest spend in our society could actually be mitigated by helping our brothers and sisters in the country be healthier. Are we allowed to talk about that, or is that just heresy? Because once again, got to tell the truth, over the next 30 years, Social Security and Medicare represent all the borrowing. And it's like $116 trillion of borrowing. Discretionary, which we talk about a lot because that's where you find some of the really stupid spending, the shiny objects, is projected to grow slower than tax receipts. My point is, for everyone out there who wants to be enraged by the White House, enraged by those of us who are trying to find solutions, bring us ideas. Bring us actual math. Stop making crap up, but if you're going to give us ideas, actually maybe read your subject area first. You'd be amazed how many things we get, where if we just didn't have foreign aid, and we show the chart that it's a week of borrowing. Understand, you have a country that our baseline is going to be borrowing about $6 billion a day. How long do you think we can do that? So first, if we can find ways to do it better, faster, cheaper, read the actual reports that we've been given for a decade that actually have ideas in this, and be willing now to do the hard work of just using technology and data and modernizing. And Mr. Speaker, one of the insane things around here, when you meet many of the folks who are in our hallways demanding more spending, demanding more regulations, demanding more barriers to entry to protect their business model or their bureaucracy, they actually hate the discussion of modernizing. You're a medical professional. You know what you're doing. The fact of the matter is there's hope. I don't think there's a lot of more years we can wait, but there's ways to do this. How do we get this body, both our brothers and sisters on the Democrat side, that actually, if they'd be willing to work with us on saying, let's modernize. Let's embrace the technology. Let's do the things we know that if we were actually caring, just maybe not great politics, but it's really good economics and really good for the future of this country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield back.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the minority leader.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous material for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Democratic Litigation and Response Task Force for helping us with this various special order hours, discussing the Trump administration's various reckless actions. And tonight, I rise to bring attention to an issue that really should have all Americans on alert, which are President Trump's tariff policies. Since the beginning of this administration, American businesses, manufacturers, and families have been stuck in limbo as the Trump administration has repeatedly threatened, then implemented, and then paused, and then restarted tariffs, creating uncertainty and instability. The most recent policy shift, a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, has been fraught with delays and exemptions, leaving American businesses, manufacturers, and consumers just stuck in limbo, not knowing how to react and how to make their plans. In fact, just this morning, Trump doubled planned tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada to 50%. And then a mere couple hours ago, a spokesman from the White House said that the tariffs on Canada were back down to 25%. You know, who knows? In true Trump administration fashion, this is complete and utter chaos. But the truth is, these tariffs, no matter if and when they go into full effect, whether it's this week or next month, they'll all ultimately have the same result: higher prices for everyday goods and a less competitive U.S. manufacturing sector. In fact, a business in my district just let me know that it's a business that makes precision formed steel tubing components. And they told me that the price of hot rolled steel is up 33% since Trump's inauguration in anticipation of these tariffs. And there is just no way that they're going to be able to avoid passing these inflationary price increases onto their customers. According to an analysis from the Yale Budget Lab, if implemented fully, these tariffs would cost the average American family between $1,600 and $2,000 a year, with working-class families who can least afford it being hit the hardest. Prices would spike across the board. Electronics like computers, phones, and TVs could rise by 11%. Clothing up by 7.5%. Cars and auto parts up by 6%. Groceries up 2%, and with fresh produce rising nearly 3%. Oil and other energy costs will rise over 1.6%, making it more expensive for families to fill up their gas tanks and heat their homes. Now, Trump is trying to spin these tariffs as something that is solely a tax on foreign companies, but history and macroeconomic facts tell us otherwise. When Trump first imposed tariffs during his first administration, it was not other countries that paid, it was American consumers and businesses. Importers passed these cost increases onto their consumers, and domestic producers hiked their own prices in response. This made U.S. manufacturers less competitive worldwide. In fact, in the last administration, Trump's policies put us into a manufacturing recession well before COVID hit. And beyond hurting hard-working American families, these tariffs threaten the stability of our economy. Analysts from across the political spectrum warn that they could slash 2.3% from GDP by 2026, wiping out a lot of projected growth. Markets also reacted with great uncertainty, as they should. Stocks have dropped and consumer confidence is cratering. And for American farmers, many of whom are already facing mounting economic challenges, the situation is even more dire. The cost of critical supplies, such as fertilizer, fuel, and equipment, will skyrocket, making it harder for farmers to maintain their operations. You know, I was just at an event earlier today with corn farmers from the Midwest. And for example, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, Canada supplies over 80% of our potash imports, which are an essential component for agricultural fertilizer. Now, guess who the next leading producers are after Canada? Russia, China, and Belarus. Now, wouldn't it be better if we could import from our friends in Canada instead of Russia, China, and Belarus? Or does our president feel differently? In any case, with increased costs, farmers will be forced to either raise prices or absorb the losses, neither of which is sustainable in the long run. And besides rising costs, farmers are already facing devastating losses in international markets. China, the largest export market for U.S. food products, has already announced retaliatory tariffs on key American agricultural goods, including wheat, corn, soybeans, pork, and dairy products. Mexico, our largest corn export market, well, they know what they'll be doing because they did it last time. When Trump did various things to insult the people of Mexico and assault their economy, they simply stopped buying corn from the United States and began borrowing it from Brazil, buying it from Brazil. Brazil, by the way, gets 2 crops a year, which when you tell that to corn farmers in the Midwest, they react. So we're in danger of losing these markets permanently if Trump continues what he did in his last go-around on tariffs. According to the USDA, in fact, the last time President Trump engaged in a trade war, it cost U.S. farmers nearly $30 billion in lost sales and market disruptions. And so in an effort to keep the farmers' heads above water, $30 billion of taxpayer money was sent their way. You know, that's not what farmers want. For decades, American farmers have worked tirelessly to expand access to foreign markets, ensuring their products reach consumers around the world. These new tariffs will undo years of progress in expanding those markets, closing off opportunities and shrinking demand for American-grown goods in the foreign market, something which domestic consumption alone cannot compensate for. And finally, Mr. Speaker, manufacturing. You know, long before coming to Congress and long before my career as a scientist, I started a manufacturing company with my brother. And starting with $500 from our parents, we built a company that now manufactures over half of all the theater lighting equipment in the United States. It provides over 1,300 manufacturing jobs in the Midwest. We do hardware, software, painting, wiring harnesses, customer support, everything. And I'm very proud that we've kept those good manufacturing jobs in the United States. And that's why boosting U.S. manufacturing and creating manufacturing jobs here has always been a top priority of mine, and why I was so horrified at the damage done to U.S. manufacturing by the last set of Trump tariffs. So I watched with deep concern as the first Trump administration's tariffs and our other trade policies put us in a manufacturing recession a year before COVID even started. Once again, Trump is pursuing a failed economic policy that was going to do nothing to bring jobs back, but instead it will drive up costs, kill growth, and undermine U.S. manufacturing, the very sector that he claims to protect. Manufacturers will be hit with soaring costs. Many U.S. manufacturers rely on imported raw materials such as steel, aluminum, auto parts from Canada and Mexico, and these tariffs will increase costs across the supply chains, making it harder to produce goods economically and much, much harder for U.S. manufacturers to export their goods in a competitive world environment. So contrary to what Trump and the Republicans are trying to say, higher cost means fewer jobs. When manufacturers face rising production expenses, they're forced to either pass those costs on to consumers, further driving up inflation, or cut jobs in production. Studies have shown that Trump's previous tariffs led to job losses, not gains, in the manufacturing sector. American manufacturers will once again struggle to compete globally. By making essential inputs more expensive, Trump is weakening U.S. manufacturers against foreign competitors who are not burdened with these artificial price hikes. Not to mention, manufacturers will likely to be hit by retaliatory tariffs when they're trying to export their goods to the countries that President Trump has targeted. This is not America first. This is America last in the global economy. The last trade war was a disaster. Under Trump's first round of tariffs, manufacturers suffered as input prices soared, supply chains were disrupted, and retaliatory tariffs from other nations crushed U.S. exports. And this time, the consequences could be even worse. The truth is, there are no winners in trade wars, only those left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. And so when the U.S. is threatened with a recession, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It will be those policies who are to blame. And next, I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. As a representative of a southern border state, New Mexico, she knows all too well the importance of fair trade with Mexico for our nation's economy, and especially for working families' wallets. And with that, I now yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for convening this special order hour. And I rise today to talk about the real-world impacts of what's happening right now in our federal government, with the dismantling of federal agencies, the free fall of our economy, and the impacts that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are having on our communities. Because what is happening right now is not normal, and it is impacting our communities in ways that many do not even understand. Right now, real people are hurting. They are scared. They don't know what's going to happen. Today in my office, I met with members of a tribal council and leaders from a tribe in New Mexico who came to visit me. Like others, they shared stories about the people in the community who are frightened about what is happening. Teachers and educators in tribal schools who've been fired without any explanation. Critical federal funds that are on hold. And when they went to meet with the Department of the Interior today, they were told that even those who are in charge of the very programs that they were meeting them about didn't know what was happening. Back home, people are frightened. They are scared. They don't know if they're going to lose their Social Security, their Medicaid, or the access to life-saving care. A few days ago, I met with the largest food bank in the state of New Mexico. They distribute food to hundreds of food pantries, churches, homeless shelters, and individual families across the state. They told me that if the cuts to food assistance go through that Republicans are proposing in their budget framework, that the number of families, and especially our children and seniors who are currently facing food insecurity, will double. There is not enough support, resources, and infrastructure in the state of New Mexico to meet the need if these programs are cut. Our food system will do everything that it can to support our communities, but it will be more severe than even during the pandemic. And every day, I am hearing from constituents in my district who have lost their jobs. These are real people, real New Mexicans, thousands of Americans who are being fired every single day by this administration for no reason. These are not faceless people, but real members of our communities. A tribal school teacher who was told in the middle of the school day that she was being fired for no reason after she had taught for years, to pack up her things and return home in front of her students. Students who don't know if they're going to be able to finish the school year and graduate. No answers, no explanation, no follow-up for how she's going to support her son and her disabled mother at home. A veteran who was on medical leave, who returned to their job at the VA on a Monday, only to find out that they had been locked out of their email. And inside that email was a nameless, faceless dismissal, letting them know that they had been fired for no reason. A dedicated public servant who drove to work every single day, 60 miles every day to the VA hospital to serve their fellow veterans, who was never even notified as to the reason they were terminated. Just a mass email sent to thousands of federal employees across the United States. And just like the other veterans across my district who lost their jobs over the last several days, another veteran who served in the Army Reserves from 2001 to 2010, who also received that same nameless, faceless email from Elon Musk. A veteran who received an Army Achievement Medal, a Combat Action Badge, and other medals and achievements over the course of their service, who was fired with devastating impacts to their family, not only financially, but emotionally. These are the real people being impacted by this administration. An administration that seems to have no regard whatsoever for the thousands of Americans who are literally losing their livelihoods every day as a result. And while they take on these actions, while they dismantle these federal agencies, while they withhold the funds that literally thousands of organizations across the country depend upon to provide vital services across our communities. While they fire these thousands of federal public servants who have dedicated their life to service, including our veterans and members of the military, they are giving themselves contracts to replace the very programs and create new services that will give them more wealth, like Elon Musk at the FAA. They're talking about monetizing HUD programs. That's right, voucher programs that our lowest income family members and members of our communities depend on. They want to turn it into a monetary program that makes private companies money. They want to turn over mortgage markets to their crypto buddies. Well, that sounds like a good idea, right? And they're doing all of this against the backdrop of trade wars that are not only endangering the American economy, but endangering the lives of millions of Americans and making it more expensive. Now, the thing I ask myself is, what is the end goal of all of this? I mean, seriously, what is the end goal? Donald Trump campaigned for the last 2 years on lowering costs. He told the American people, if you elect me, I will make it cheaper and easier to live in America. And so I want to ask my fellow Americans, is it cheaper than it was 6 weeks ago in America? If you've been grocery shopping over the last several weeks, you are seeing that prices are higher than they have ever been. We're not just talking about the price of eggs and meat, it's everything. The price of housing, the price of groceries, the price of energy. Not only have prices not gone down, they've gone up. And now, because of these tariffs and trade wars, we know that everything is going to get exponentially more expensive. The raw materials that fuel American manufacturing and construction, more expensive. Produce and food, more expensive. Energy, more expensive. What are they doing? Why are they doing this? Why are my colleagues enabling this administration to harm the American people, enabling this administration to put harmful policies in place that are making not only more expensive for Americans, but tanking our economy? What is this all about? To what end? I ask my colleagues, honestly, Mr. Speaker, to what end is all of this? What is the point of hurting real Americans? These policies are not making life better for real Americans. It is really about stealing from the working people of this country to make the wealthier more wealthy. And if you need any more evidence of that, then all you have to do is look at the budget framework that they passed here in this chamber 2 weeks ago. Now, a couple of weeks ago when they passed this budget, they pretended like we're just trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And we're going to take those savings and reinvest it into tax breaks and help the American people. But as has passed over the last couple of weeks, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Over the weekend, Republicans were on a blitz across the news media saying that they were going to gut Medicaid. They're talking about it openly now. They're going to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the basic programs that sustain Americans. Over the weekend, Elon Musk talked openly about gutting Social Security. This is their plan. And what are they going to do with all of that saving? Quote unquote savings? They're going to use it to give permanent tax breaks to billionaires. That's it. That is what all of this is in service to. Taking from the people who have spent their lives serving this country, proudly serving this nation, proudly working to put food on the table and a roof over their head for their families. And they're going to give that money to billionaires. That's what this is all about. It hurts my heart. My colleagues passed their budget resolution, their budget CR this afternoon, and the vast majority of them are on planes back to their districts, where they are not going to hold town halls. Their leadership told them not to, because they don't want to hear from the people who are unhappy and being hurt by these harms to our communities. So I have to ask my colleagues, why are you even here? What is this all in service of? Go home and represent your people, and come back here and have a backbone to stand up for the Constitution and the people of this country, because real people are being hurt. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Stansbury, for speaking today and to share how some of Trump's policies are going to harm your constituents. You know, in your state and near your district are national security workers, atomic scientists at Sandia and Los Alamos labs, who were fired and then unfired and are still being threatened with being fired. And I'm a scientist. I know a lot of people that are in that situation. And the damage that's done to our national security when you tell people that working at a national lab, especially a national security lab, is not a safe place in terms of being able to depend on an income to raise your family, that it does damage to our national security that can never be undone. It is not a small deal, and the fact that some 23-year-old kid with a software background is deciding they know more about the workforce that we need to make sure our nuclear weapons are safe and effective is about as bad government as you could even ever imagine. And so that's, and I'd also like to echo your questions about why does Trump do this? Why does he actually do this? The president's reputation, it's based on, as a great businessman, it's based on making a series of one-off deals. And he's a real estate deal maker, not a manufacturer, not a businessman who has real customers. And he thinks he's done a good deal when he uses all the leverage in his negotiation to make sure that he's really rooked his counterparty, his customer, to the extent possible in his real estate transactions. Now, I'm very different. I'm a manufacturer. And the last thing you want if you're a manufacturer is a dissatisfied customer. It's a completely different mindset. And the problem occurs when Donald Trump views our allies as people to be rooked, people to be insulted, people to use the leverage to get the most out of the current situation with them, instead of trying to develop the long-term business relationship that is really the basis of the long-term economic security of our country. And that's my best understanding of why the president does these things, because certainly he has his advisors that let him know that his policies are going to have disastrous economic effects. In fact, just a couple of nights ago in an interview, President Trump declined to rule out the possibility of a recession, which I imagine his competent advisors have been shouting in his ear for weeks now. As I said earlier, there are no winners in a trade war. There are only those who are left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting it at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. So if the U.S. indeed enters a recession, we will know who to blame. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 30 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks
and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate my colleagues who are also members of the Border Security Caucus. For 4 years, we've stood here and exposed the open border policies of the Biden-Harris administration. For 4 years, we've seen what happens when the America First border security policies that President Trump had put in place were thrown out. And in just over 1 month, we've seen what happens when those policies are put back in place. Since President Trump took office, ICE agents have arrested more than 20,000 illegal aliens. That's just in 1 month. By comparison, Joe Biden only had 33,000 at-large arrests for the entire year of 2024. And when Joe Biden was in charge, over 300,000 illegal aliens crossed the border in just 1 month. In President Trump's first month, illegal crossings did not even reach 10,000. The actual number was 8,400. And whereas Biden let all of those people into the country without proper vetting, some of which were known criminals and terrorists that we're now trying to find, under President Trump, people who illegally cross the border are stopped and immediately detained or removed. Because of President Biden's catch and release policies, every state had the pathologies of a border state. Because of this, immediately after taking office, President Trump charged ICE officers with cleaning up streets across the country by detaining the illegal aliens that Joe Biden had released into the country. And while they were attempting to prosecute him, President Trump, for bogus charges in multiple jurisdictions, the Biden regime was releasing actual criminals into every city in America. Tonight, we're going to be exposing the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies and President Trump's work to remove them. We'll highlight the tireless work of ICE agents tasked with arresting some of the worst individuals who have invaded our country. Despite being demonized by the mainstream media and organized campaigns to interfere with and prevent arrests, including by exposing personal information of agents, in just 1 month, those agents have taken thousands of violent and malevolent offenders off of our streets. In just 1 month, President Trump has put an end to the endless invasion of our communities by illegal aliens. It's my pleasure now to yield to my co-chairman of the Border Security Caucus, 3 minutes to the gentleman, Mr. Babin.
Thank you to my good friend, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and my co-chair. Really appreciate you having tonight's very important special order. Well, the truth is simple. The Biden administration threw open the floodgates, allowing murderers, rapists, and chaos to pour into our communities, all in pursuit of political power. They knew exactly what they were doing. Securing the border was never an impossibility, as they let the nation and us believe. It was always a choice, and for the last 4 years, the wrong choice was deliberately made. We were told that enforcement wouldn't work, that the crisis was simply too big to fix, but those were lies. Lies meant to cover up the fact that an open border was exactly what they wanted to do. They dismantled every tool that worked, inviting criminals to walk right in. And we saw the consequences play out in the most destructive ways imaginable. 15 million illegals entered under the Biden administration's watch. Tonight, you will hear about the evils that were unleashed onto our neighborhoods by the Biden administration, resulting in death and destruction of innocent American lives. How many more lives must be lost? How many more families must grieve before they admit their open border agenda is destroying this country? 100,000 Americans per year dying of deadly Mexican cartel and Chinese drugs that have come in over our open border. Hundreds of thousands of lost children from the child sex trade and human trafficking, murders, rapes, and pillaging from illegal alien gangs, swamped public schools, hospitals, and public services. But here's the good news, folks. The days of lawlessness are over, because on day one
of the Donald Trump administration, we finally have a strong leader in the White House. And just like that, the border was shut down. All it took was that leadership and the will to enforce the law. The message was sent loud and clear. America is not open for lawbreakers anymore. Illegal crossings have plummeted. Deportations are back in full force. And as co-chair of the Border Security Caucus, I'm committed to keeping these dangerous criminals off of our streets. Working hand in hand with President Trump, with Vice President Vance, and leaders like Tom Homan, we're making sure that child traffickers, drug smugglers, and gang members are rounded up and sent packing back to where they belong. We are kicking them out by the thousands, just like we should have been doing all along these last 4 years. This is how you put America first, folks. You don't make excuses, you act. You don't let criminals run free. You lock them up or send them home. You don't leave the border wide open. You shut it down and you take control. The American people deserve safety, not suffering. They deserve law and order, not chaos. They deserve leadership that protects them, not one that absolutely betrays them. And that's what Donald Trump and Tom Homan are delivering to us right now, and they are just getting started. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman who's seen in his own district time and time again the abuse caused by this out-of-control illegal aliens.
Man.
And now it's my pleasure to yield to my friend from Wisconsin, also in the Border Security Caucus, the gentleman, Tom Tiffany, for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to say thank you to the gentlemen that have led the Border Caucus, Mr. Babin and Mr. Biggs. Thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. It's as a result of your efforts that you continue to deliver this message to the American people of what a disaster this was going on in our southern border that caused this to be the #1 issue in the past election before the American people. And in particular, I want to thank Mr. Biggs from Arizona. The first trip I did after being sworn in May of 2020 was to go down to the southern border, and with a trip that he led with many of us, as he did so many times with so many members. I don't know if there's hardly any members on the Republican side that he didn't lead on the southern border to deliver the message. It's there that I got to meet people like Sheriff Mark Lamb from Pinal County in Arizona, Sheriff Mark Daniels down in Cochise County, who talked about back in 2020 about how the border was becoming secure. At the end of the Trump administration's first term, the border was becoming more secure. You visited them a year later, and they told you it was all deteriorating, simply because there was a change in the presidency. So I want to thank them for their leadership in regards to this. You have done a service to the American people, and hopefully we can fix this for the future. We just had a hearing this morning with a sheriff from one of the counties in Texas, a border county there, as well as one of the leaders of the Border Patrol Union. And they told us it is night and day since January 20th. Thank God we have new leadership in the White House, because the border is once again secure. So I would just say, remember when the media and Democrats told us that President Biden needed a bill to fix the border? That was a lie. As President Trump said last week in his joint address, all we really needed was a new president. If there's one thing that's been proven over the last month, it's that the Democrats' border invasion was intentional. President Trump announced illegal border crossings in February were the lowest in decades. February 2024 under Biden, nearly 190,000. 2025 under Trump, a little over 8,000. That's a 96% decrease without a single new law from Congress. The difference, real leadership. It's truly a shame that Democrats willingly let the killers of Laken Riley, Jocelyn Nungare, and Rachel Morin into this country. It's also a shame they did not deport criminals like the one in my congressional district who killed Stephen Nashholm, a father of 3 daughters. Thankfully, President Trump didn't wait for excuses. He took action by putting Remain in Mexico back in place, declared an emergency at our southern border, sent troops to help the Border Patrol, put a stop to illegal crossings, and signed the Laken Riley Act into law to deport dangerous criminals. Gone are the days of catch and release, which have a completely different meaning where I come from in the lakes in northern Wisconsin. But President Biden had turned it into an illegal alien term where illegals who were caught at our southern border were released into the U.S. To be clear, the last administration chose to let America be invaded. President Trump chose to stop it. Now American strength is back and stronger than ever, but we cannot stop here. Congress must act now to ensure these gains are not undone by the next weak president in the White House. We must codify things like stopping birthright citizenship, ending catch and release, ensuring that ICE has the tools needed to carry out mass deportations, and preventing parole abuse permanently. President Trump is doing his job. Now it's time for Congress to do ours. No more excuses. It's time to stand up for America. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Appreciate his willingness. We have been to the border together. As everyone speaking tonight, I think we have been, except for Mr. Gill, who I've got to get down there with me because it's always fun. Anyway, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to my good friend from Georgia, Mr. Clyde.
Thank you to my friend Congressman Biggs for holding tonight's special order and leading on this critical border issue. Since day one, President Trump has taken incredible steps to secure our border and protect the American people. These measures include ending catch and release, reinstating Remain in Mexico, restarting construction of the border wall, and cracking down on sanctuary cities. Recently, the Trump administration ended the taxpayer subsidization of open borders, meaning Americans' hard-earned tax dollars will no longer be used to support or incentivize illegal immigration. Additionally, the Trump administration has made great progress in carrying out its mass deportation operation. You know, what used to be called the CBP-1 app to allow illegals to more easily come into the country is now the CBP Home app. And you know why it's called the Home app? Because it's good for a one-way ticket home for illegal aliens so they can self-deport. President Trump is emptying our country of illegal aliens. Promises made, promises kept. Border Czar Tom Homan and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem are tirelessly working to detain and deport illegal aliens. ICE agents, along with key assistance from local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, have already arrested and issued detainers for thousands of criminal illegal aliens, including murderers, drug traffickers, suspected terrorists, and MS-13 gang members. For example, ICE recently arrested an illegal alien in Atlanta, in my home state of Georgia, whose criminal history includes a conviction of 4 counts of indecent liberty with a child. 4 counts. This heinous criminal illegal has no place in the Peach State or anywhere else in our great country for that matter. I'm deeply appreciative of the Trump administration for taking criminal illegals off of our streets. My Northeast Georgia district has seen the devastating impact of criminal illegal alien crime up close and personal. Last year, Maria Gomez Perez, a 12-year-old girl, was abducted in Gainesville, Georgia by an illegal alien. Thankfully, she was rescued and found in Ohio. Days before the 2024 election, Mimi Rodriguez Ramirez, a 25-year-old mother, was murdered by an illegal alien from Mexico, and that happened in Habersham County. And just outside my district, Laken Riley, the 22-year-old nursing student, was brutally murdered by an illegal alien in Athens, Georgia. President Trump is working to prevent these tragedies from devastating additional families and communities across our country. I applaud his work to make America secure, safe, and great once again. Thank you, and I yield back to my friend from Arizona.
I thank my friend, the gentleman from Georgia. And now I am privileged to yield 3 minutes to my friend from Indiana, who I took, and I'll always remember him going off with Art Del Cueto and leaving the rest of us in a car stuck with a bad tire and stuck in the dirt as we were down on the border. But it's good to see that you made it, Jim. So I yield 3 minutes to Mr. Baird.
I thank my good friend from Arizona. I'm also see that you got back, and I appreciate that. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, under the Biden administration, our borders were wide open, with record numbers of illegal immigrants and deadly drugs flooding across our border. Under President Biden, every single state became a border state, including Indiana. These include dangerous criminals that ties to gangs such as the Tres de Argo and the MS-13, who have committed horrific crimes and vicious attacks against innocent Americans. Last year, an illegal immigrant with ties to MS-13 stabbed a teenage girl in the hand at a baseball game in Lowell, Indiana. After an extensive search, the culprit was found and arrested. I thank law enforcement officers for their hard work to find and arrest this criminal. Under President Trump, we have swiftly returned to common sense border policies, and illegal border crossings have plunged to a record low. In January 2025, there were 61,465 illegal border crossings, down from 176,000 in January of 24. Just last month, illegal crossings at our southern border plummeted to the lowest level on record. President Trump has sent a message loud and clear to border is closed, and his strong border security policies are working. House Republicans are working with the president to implement his agenda to secure our border and keep Americans safe. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman who's also a member of the Border Security Caucus. Thank you for being with us tonight. And now it's my pleasure to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, another border state, a newcomer who's setting the world on fire, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the past 4 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats have inundated American communities with massive numbers of violent illegal aliens who are murdering and raping and torturing and pillaging our people on our soil. And the entire time they did it not by accident, but as a deliberate policy decision to open up our borders and flood our country with people that they believed would be future Democrat voters for life. It was also, we have to remember, a part of a policy that was done with the approbation of a cheap labor lobby who wanted to import millions of people who would act as a virtual new serf class of laborers to reduce American working class wages in this country. The consequences of this were absolutely catastrophic for the American people. Almost 15 million illegal aliens, perhaps more, depending on what estimates we use, have come into this country. Thankfully, this nightmare is finally over because we have a president who actually cares about the American people. We have a president who doesn't make excuses, a president who doesn't tell us lies like the executive needs to rely on new laws to enforce our border, a president who actually just gets the job done. His border enforcement efforts have caused known gotaways to fall by 93%, with an average of just 132 a day right now. And even as this nightmare in our country is finally coming to a close, we've got colleagues on the other side of the aisle right now who are facilitating this invasion as best they can and going back to their districts and helping protect illegal aliens who have no business being here in the first place and teaching them how to evade ICE detection. Absolutely disgusting, Mr. Speaker. We have got to codify President Trump's border policies into law so that we cannot let the other side of the aisle unleash the same kind of hell on our country that they did over the past 4 years. We've got to codify every single executive order, including his Remain in Mexico policy. I've got a bill, the Remain in Mexico Act, that would do precisely that. We've got over 100 co-sponsors. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to bring this bill to the floor. This is what the American people want. This is what the president wants. and I think we need to act fast. So with that, I yield back and thank you guys very much.
I thank the gentleman. I thank him for his passion and he's right. He's right. We do need to codify President Trump's policies, because we cannot ever go back to a period of time like we just experienced under the Biden regime. So the Trump policies are a product of understanding what needs to happen. The mere fact that Donald Trump was elected almost immediately terminated the onslaught of people crossing our border. Let me give you an example. When I was meeting with the new Border Patrol chief, Chief Banks, and I asked him what's going on. He said, Andy, 3 caravans turned back yesterday. That is what happens when you enforce the law. People who are going to break the law, they stop breaking the law. So when I was down at the border just a few weeks back, I wanted to compare. So I went to a place where I knew we had regular flow of illegal aliens crossing the border. It was eerily quiet when I was there. The only thing that we saw and noticed on the southern side of the border were the watchers, the scouts. All of a sudden, they saw us, they came out, they were watching and observing us. But let's talk about some of the people that have come in under the Biden administration's terrible, terrible, and dangerous anti-American policy. First is Eduardo Domingo Renault Matu. Some call him Turco. In the sanctuary city of Los Angeles, federal agents arrested Eduardo Domingo Renault Matu, also known as Turco, who's charged with running one of the largest human smuggling organizations in the country, spanning 5 years and smuggling in around 20,000 illegal aliens, largely between LA and Phoenix. And just so you know, the last number was about $10,000 per person that he was smuggling. A co-defendant of his was also charged with threatening to behead a Homeland Security investigations agent and his family while authorities were conducting a search of his home. Charges against them, he and his co-defendant, include hostage-taking, transporting aliens into the U.S., and transporting aliens for private financial gain and resulting in death. Illegal aliens were charged, in some instances, more than $15,000 for transportation, and if they couldn't make the payment, they were held as hostages in stash houses in L.A. and Phoenix. So let's take a look at someone else. Let's see if we can find Wilmer Giovanni Fuentes Benitez. On February 2nd, ICE officers in Philadelphia arrested Honduran national Wilmer Giovanni Fuentes Benitez, who was previously deported 3 times. This time he was also arrested for resisting arrest and battery of a police officer. These are the people that my friends across the aisle say should be allowed to remain here in these sanctuary cities. ICE agents in Omaha arrested a member of Tren de Aragua who had spent 7 years in a Venezuela prison for robbery, resisting arrest, and unlawfully discharging a firearm. In Newark, New Jersey, ICE agents arrested Fernando Hernandez Martinez for 2 counts of child molestation. We have another poster. This is Jose Roberto Rodriguez Urbina. On January 22nd, ICE agents in New York City arrested El Salvadoran national Jose Roberto Rodriguez Urbina, who is wanted in his home country on extortion charges. This is what happens when an administration does not properly vet people they let into the country. Criminal fugitives see the U.S. as a safe haven from justice, and they abuse the parole statute. They literally granted parole to millions of people when the very purpose of parole never saw more than 25 or so people admitted into the country under parole, but not under the Biden administration. In St. Paul, Minnesota, another individual was arrested by ICE agents, Victor Covarrubia Ozuna, for sexually assaulting a child. Another, in San Francisco, California, ICE agents arrested Edwin Davila Galvan for lewd acts with a minor. We have another poster. On January 27th, ICE agents in San Diego arrested an Afghani who had an existing removal order and was a known or suspected terrorist. Despite having a removal order, the Biden-Harris administration and Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas could not be bothered to deport this suspected terrorist. He was roaming our streets and had to be captured by ICE agents. We have another individual, another poster. No posters, okay. On February 5th, ICE officers in Harris County, Texas, arrested Mexican national David Gonzalez Martinez for aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. Gonzalez has illegally entered the country at least 4 times and was removed from the U.S. in 2001, 2008, and 2015. He was previously convicted of voluntary manslaughter, aggravated assault with a weapon, drug possession, and illegal reentry. On January 27th, ICE agents in Brockton, Massachusetts, arrested Guatemalan national Edilio Agustin Ariana. Augustin is charged with 5 counts of assault with a dangerous weapon, 3 counts of kidnapping, and armed home invasion. He has a record with ICE going back as far as 2002, when he was first arrested for illegally entering the United States. 4 minutes. These are the types of individuals that are currently being arrested by ICE under the leadership of Tom Homan. These are the types of individuals that are being protected by sanctuary cities. When we had recently a hearing, we had the mayors of 4 of these sanctuary cities in. All of them said, but we cooperate with ICE. We don't keep people from being deported, or we don't stop handing them over, but they do. They release them in the parking lot. Let me read you the statutes that they're violating. Here's one. 8 U.S.C. 1373A, notwithstanding any other provision of federal, state, or local law, or federal, state, or local government entity may not prohibit or any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration and Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual. You cannot do it. There's not even a culpable mental state required. You simply can't restrict it. But the sanctuary cities are preventing ICE and the immigration officials from getting this information. Here's this one. This is 8 U.S.C. 1324C. In conducting investigations and hearings, immigration officers and administrative law judges shall have a reasonable access to examine evidence of any person or entity being investigated. But when the sanctuary city mayors say you can't cooperate with ICE, they're violating this statute. They have criminal culpability. And also, you'll see there's no culpable mental state. There's no requirement that they intentionally or willfully, knowingly do it. It's a per se statute. They're violating this. They have criminal culpability. The sanctuary cities also have culpability on this. Any person who knowing, now you have a culpable mental state, that a person is an alien, knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection, such alien in any place shall, for each alien in respect to whom such a violation occurs, be fined, imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both. Now, I want you to understand something. What you have here is you have mayors telling their police chiefs and their officers, don't hand these people over. Don't hand them over. And there's no distinction between civil or criminal. And when they do that, they know that they're concealing. That's a penalty. That's a criminal sentence up to 10 years. They're violating the law. They need to be prosecuted. And I'm calling on Pam Bondi, the new Attorney General, and I'm also calling on Mr. Holman to make that happen. With that, Mr. Chairman, I tip my hat to Mr. President Trump. What he's done just by enforcing the law has actually secured most of our border. With that, I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Friday, March 14th, 2025.